Okay, good morning or afternoon. I'm going to just do a quick update, and there's a few issues, and these are just no value until only when you see it, hopefully. Today is Saturday, January 19th, 2019. Okay, let me start. There's various titles I could give to this news update, and I don't want to be flippant, but maybe I'll title this Every Newscaster that refers to the upcoming Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And if you have what we call a Freudian slip, as we studied in the past Freud, if you say Martin Luther Coon Jr., let's set the policy. You get fired on that day. What are you talking about, John? Last week, as a newsreader, which I read the news for the last hour after doing my other stuff, last week there was a newscaster somewhere in the U.S., and he slipped and said Martin Luther Coon Jr., which for those who are not familiar, most are, is a racist terminology speaking about a black person. Okay, when he said it, the news that he worked for, whatever station it was, some local affiliate in some city, they kind of defended him. He's got a good background. It was a slip. We don't. And then activists had to put pressure on the news station to fire him, which they rightfully did. Okay. Sure enough, today, and this is on CNN online, and I looked at all the news. We'll do a little local in a minute. Another newsman said it again. He was on TV talking about the upcoming Martin Luther King Jr., and he called Martin Luther Coon Jr. And once again, the news station he works for is saying, this is not the way he lives, this is not his principles, this is sort of like so out of line. Understand, he should be fired today. It's the same thing. They're going through, the news group is saying he's a good man. If somebody else said that accusation about those men, like if somebody else said, secondhand knowledge, he called Martin Luther King Jr. Coon, and then you investigated and the man said, that's not my background, that's not, which is like a typical defense. But if you say it on the air, why do you have to have civil rights people, social justice people have to put pressure on that news station to just simply fire the guy? And it's the second time, and I'm sure he'll get fired later today or tomorrow, but what we should have is a policy. Every year, as Martin Luther King Jr. Day comes up, any newscaster anywhere in the world that calls him a coon, you're fired. How about that? Now let's talk about the big news yesterday, as a news watcher, was there was an online news outlet called BuzzFeed. And BuzzFeed supposedly had a scoop that none of the other mainline news had as of yesterday. And BuzzFeed put out an article that said, because of two inside confidential sources working with either Mr. Mueller's team or whoever, FBI, Justice Department, that they basically had insider knowledge, and the news report was put out that Donald Trump instructed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress about a particular real estate deal that Mr. Trump was engaged in, trying to build a hotel in Moscow, Russia, before he was running for president. But that deal, he was still in negotiations at the time during his campaign, and then when he's coming in office, how long did Mr. Cohen have basically meetings on this real estate Trump hotel in Moscow? Okay, that kind of true story. I mean, Cohen did indeed lie about when the negotiations stopped on that deal. Well, BuzzFeed's article said Trump instructed Cohen to lie. Okay, a lot of major news people on cable, MSNBC, CNN, they did run with it. You had Democrats saying we must impeach Mr. Trump. Now, look, whatever side of the aisle you're on, I'm just trying to talk journalistically. That they actually had multiple reports that said, this is what's happened. BuzzFeed has put out this article, and a lot of main or big cable news outlets and all basically said, and if the story is accurate, this would be a big thing. Old-time journalism, which used to be somewhat reputable, you never saw major breaking stories with the same line, if the story is true. Basically, historic journalism would not publish or print or put out a story until they knew it was either true or accurate. They wouldn't run with the same type of a coverage of the story that they themselves, in their own reporting, are saying. When the other news outlets reported on the BuzzFeed story, the other news outlets said, if this is true or if this is accurate. So in normal journalism, if something is not yet verified by the other news, you just don't put it out. Now I understand that because of the weight of the possibility of it being true, but they ran with it. And it does, and strangely enough, Mr. Mueller himself, I believe it's the first statement that the special counsel's office actually ever put out. The statement basically saying the BuzzFeed story is wrong. Now, why Mr. Mueller did put that out, I'm not exactly sure, but maybe he recognized how, it was a false story about his office. Because the story said that Mueller's team themselves were the ones, that's the supposed thing, that had the information, and Mueller's team had verified it on their own, and it was fake, okay? It was not true. Now let me quickly jump to, I'll try to be balanced. This will deal a little bit with Mark Gonzalez, the DA of Nueces County, and Mike Markle, Chief Mike Markle, CCPD. And in the local news, as I read it last night and also today, you have 4 basic local news outlets that you could read online to see what's going on. One is KIII-TV, KZ-TV, KRAS-TV, and then the Caller Times online. Now, the only local news that reported this story was the Caller Times. And I'm wondering whether or not maybe they should have reported this. There's other local news, but let me just hit on this, being we're doing a little media right now. The district attorney, Mark Gonzalez, sent a letter to the local law enforcement of Nueces County, which his office is the prosecutor DA for Nueces County. Now, granted, the biggest city in Nueces County, obviously, is Corpus Christi. And so the biggest law enforcement agency that would, have a response to the letter that Mark Gonzalez sent out would be the CCPD, okay? You also have the sheriff's office, you have Aransas, or a couple of little communities that this affects. But in essence, what Mark Gonzalez, the new district attorney, said was, from now on, his office is not going to prosecute misdemeanor cases on people who are also charged with felonies at the same time. Now, it seems like Mr. Gonzalez is making an honest effort to focus his office and to use the resources wisely. Because what happens maybe in your county, in your city, but what happens in Corpus Christi and Nueces County is if they make an arrest and somebody is facing felony charges. I've had, many of my friends in these scenarios. And if you also have like misdemeanor charges tagged along with felony charges, the normal process, from what I understand, is the DA's office, of course, they're going to drop whatever the misdemeanors are, and they're only going to seek to prosecute the felony, as they investigate, cops will investigate, or sheriff's office investigate, then they hand the case over to the DA, and it's up to the DA's office to decide. So I guess what's happened is it's kind of flooded the DA's office in the sense that if you have people with felony and they're before the courts of Nueces County, and then they might have 2 or 3 misdemeanors included in the felony. Maybe they did a bank robbery, and then the felony, armed robbery, whatever, and then they evaded arrest or something, which I think a misdemeanor. Okay, and then maybe they gave false ID to the cop during this whole one incident. So then you could have 2 or 3 misdemeanors, evading the arrest or giving a false ID or whatever else, and then you have the bank robbery, the felony. Well, the cops or the SO, the sheriff, I guess they would, make the arrest, and then they would put rightfully, these are all the other charges. And then they just send that to the DA. And so what the DA normally would do is, okay, we're going to seek to prosecute on the felony, and the others, they're going to be dropped. That seems to be the normal routine. But it does take time to have somebody at the DA's office on each one of these cases to personally look at each charge. He's arrested, here's the charges, and then if the normal routine is they just look at him, then they respond, okay, we're dropping the misdemeanors. So what Mark Gonzalez wants to do, and sent a letter out, basically said, look, my office is no longer going to prosecute misdemeanors with defendants that are also before our office with felonies. It seems like he's just basically trying to cut down on the extra work that it's taking when they're already dropped those misdemeanors anyway. And so he's telling, Mark Gonzalez is simply trying to streamline, and he's saying, instead of us having to waste time with our prosecutors having to look at each one of those misdemeanors and to do the normal routine and say, well, no, we dropped that one, we're going to go with felony. But he said, let's just do that automatically. Now, rightfully, I guess, the Chief Markle would have concern in this sense that if his officers are out in the field doing their jobs and they do make an arrest, now if the offenders know they're not going to get charged anymore, they will still get arrested if the officer decides to arrest them for maybe giving false ID or whatever the other misdemeanors might be. There was a list of 20-something misdemeanors that Mark Gonzalez mentioned. Just count them as we're not going to prosecute those, along with felony offenders. And the chief's position, from what the Call to Time said, seems to be that might concern his department. And I think his concern would be honest as well, because he might be worried that if his officers are out and there is somebody that commits felony or is already on, he's waiting, he's out on bond or bail, and he's got a felony, maybe he knows he's got one, and then he just lies to the cop, gives false ID. If the offenders, people that are committing the crimes, maybe they'll realize, hey, we can get away with these particular misdemeanors now, and therefore they're going to just lie to the cops. Now, the cops can still arrest them, but Gonzalez said, look, instead of going through the paperwork, just, say that my office declined to prosecute in that. Now, I understand both sides of it, and I understand the concerns of both sides. Here's where the Call to Times comes in. I think if all this was kept in-house, meaning the other 3 local news outlets did not report that, maybe this would have been something better to have not put in the media. Because how many offenders would have known that? If this was just something like it was going to streamline and Mr. Gonzalez maybe the police chief had a disagreement and wrote back or whatever and said, no, we don't think this is good, maybe this story would have been better off not being reported. Because the concern, it seems like the police would have, or any law enforcement, Sheriff Hooper, his comment I read, he said, I'm not going to comment on it yet until I read the letter, which I think is kind of professional. But the big concern is, how will criminals, once they have knowledge of this new policy, how will it cause them to react? And my answer would be, or question would be, they wouldn't know about any of this. This would still all have been in-house. If the criminal knows I'm under a felony already, and if he doesn't know that this policy was in effect, he would still, it wouldn't change the way he might act in a certain type of criminal situation. So it's the knowledge of this now, that's now in the public domain. How many people that are on the streets, how many will know about it because the Calder Times chose to make this public? So maybe that would have been better just to not have informed the public, you see. And people say we have open, we want to have sunshine laws and shine a light on things. So that would be an example where maybe it just would have been better to have allowed Mark Gonzalez to basically try to, work that out with the local law enforcement agencies. I think that Chief Markle's concern is legitimate. I think if I was running a department and I had men and women that were out there doing their jobs, and then I had to now worry that certain offenders realize, I got a felony before the DA, so I don't have to worry about lying to this cop about my ID or whatever. Yeah, that could have a negative effect on policing. It sure could. And I also understand Mark Gonzalez's view, because he wrote the first letter, according to the Calder Times, notified the local law enforcement about the new policy. And then in the second one, and they said he did a Facebook explanation. I don't check Mark Gonzalez on Facebook. And in essence, it just seems like he's trying to say, we already reject these misdemeanors. When these same offenders have a felony at the same time, we're already rejecting. And it seems like Gonzalez is saying, look, nothing would really change in-house. You just automatically would know, right on the report. The DA declines to prosecute. DA's office declines to prosecute. It just seems like Mark Gonzalez was trying to streamline. He wasn't telling the cops, don't make the arrest if it's a misdemeanor, and the guy's also got a felony before the court. You're still able at your judgment to make the request, the arrest. So it seemed like it wasn't really, it's just now that it's in the public domain, yes, it would have an effect. Because some criminals might read that and realize, I can lie now. He can arrest me, but Gonzalez, so it would have been better. Okay. So that's an issue where you're seeing both sides, if you will, CCPD, law enforcement agencies, and also the DA's office, that, I think it's legitimate. I don't think one side on that would be wrong, or the other side is just the right side. And that just seems like to be fair, to give a fair thing on it. All right, so I'll end it with that. I didn't want to go long, and I don't want to really. When you saw me do that video on the Facebook group called Sleeping Giants the other day, what Sleeping Giants is an organized group on Facebook. Now there are a few other groups called that, so I hope if you all knew the one I was talking about. But what they are is a politically active group that seeks to remove voices that they do not agree with from all online, or, if you will, on TV things. They're like a liberal group that wants to remove people's videos from YouTube. And so they target basically conservative voices that they don't agree with, whether it's Tucker Carlson from Fox News or whoever, and then they target advertisers, but they also do something extra. See, they go the extra mile, and they contact some of these new alternative video upload sites that have risen in the last few years as a direct response to these types of groups targeting YouTube to get people off of YouTube. So you had other video groups, other video sites like BitChute, DTube. Dailymotion's been around for a while. Now these other sites are gaining somewhat of popularity. They're not really as functional yet as YouTube. They got to work out a lot of kinks. But the reason these other sites have, some you see me on, the BitTube, DTube, and BitTube, the main reason they propped up is to give an online voice to all sides of the issue. And these other groups, like the one I mentioned, whatever it was, Silent Giants or something, they contact YouTube, they contact Facebook, they contact, and they try to remove people from having an online presence. So they make direct, and so people start uploading to these other sites. That's where they arose. And so this has been going on for a while. Everybody has a free voice in society. But I think when you begin, I have disagreements with CNN, obviously, and MSNBC and all, or disagreements. But when you organize, and not just go after, I don't have advertisers, I don't sell ads, or I don't monetize, but when you organize and just directly contact YouTube or whatever and say, take this person off. See, some of that happened with the little Google situation I was dealing with as well. Google changed manually the algorithms, the search thing for YouTube about abortion. Why did they do that? They changed because there were natural viral videos about abortion that were from the pro-life or conservative view. Now those videos naturally trended to the top of YouTube over time. Another liberal, it's fine if you're liberal, news organization called Slate, Slate.com or Slate Magazine, the people from that news organization personally contacted YouTube, which is part of Google, and said, you have too many pro-life videos that pop up on YouTube when people search for abortion. And they pressured YouTube and Google to change it. We want the pro-abortion videos to be the first that pop up. Now, from what I understand, the natural algorithm just brought these pro-life videos to the forefront. And so Google and YouTube personally manually manipulated the search rankings because a liberal group called Slate contacted, and pressured. See, that's different than doing advertising. You have every right to target an advertiser and to say, if you want to go to contact advertisers and say, your ads are popping up on a certain program, and we disagree with it, so we're going to... But then when you directly contact the distributor of the video, YouTube itself, and then you say, take them off. So we stand against that because you're trying to silence free speech on that. That's what you saw me do that one on the Silent Giants. That's what they do. They're not just organizing to say we have a different viewpoint. They contact these organizations. That's where you have, what happened, I would say support BitChute. They tried to do the same thing with the video site called BitChute. They also said, because that site allowed Alex Jones and InfoWars to be on BitChute. They contacted BitChute ownership, guy who runs that site, alternative YouTube site. They said, take Alex Jones off. And he said, no, we're going to give a voice to all voices, the way the free market should work. Everybody has a voice, which I agree with. Now, when BitChute refused to remove Alex Jones, they stood their ground, as far as I know, till this day. They contacted the same activists, contacted PayPal, and made PayPal remove their service from BitChute. All right, so now BitChute doesn't have the ability to use PayPal for the people that do pay for the thing. See, that's the problem I see with that. You've caused a tremendous, the whole BuzzFeed thing. You can be an activist, but be responsible in your activism. Make sure you have the story right. And in the case of our local Caller Times, then, I don't know if you should have put that in the public domain. Granted, there was somewhat of a dispute between maybe the new policy of Markle, Gonzalez, like I explained. But most people wouldn't have been aware of that. Meaning, if you didn't publish that whole thing, most people that are committing crimes, they wouldn't say, oh, look, now we can get away with giving a false ID, or now these are all the misdemeanors. Nobody would have really known. The process would have worked the same. Gonzalez's DA's office, it just would have streamlined. So responsible journalism is you want the truth out, and if there's certain things that you know, okay, maybe it's not beneficial just to put that in the public domain. And that might have been one of them. All right, so this is the little update. Tomorrow we'll do our teaching, regular teaching, and that's why you see me on some of these other various sites. Those were alternative sites because people are trying to ban voices. Even when I Googled BitChute, I'm on BitChute. BitChute is a alternative YouTube. There are on Google, which is a competitor, there are articles written that BitChute is defunct, out of business. You see that? Google is a competitor with YouTube. They own YouTube now, with BitChute. When you Google BitChute, the articles that pop up is BitChute is no longer in existence, it's fallen by. That's a lie. That's a manipulation right there, okay? So we'll put the title on this. Remember, all news people, if you make the Freudian slip and call Martin Luther King Jr. a coon, you lose your job that day. Maybe you get hired somewhere else, or maybe you'll have to find another. Let's just set that little precedent, okay? God bless everybody.